Narratives in film dictate the way a story plays out. Most common in movies are linear narratives that include exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the denouement, or resolution. This narrative style is easily digestible and therefore more accessible to a wider audience. However, without a compelling story, developed characters, and good writing, the product can be dull. Non-linear narratives give the audience an experience that requires a little more thought, but does so to keep them engaged, not to be pretentious, although sometimes they can be. Christopher Nolan is one filmmaker that boasts an almost entire filmography of non-linear narratives. Nolan's obsession is time. Time usually takes a central or supportive role in his films that affects the way the story is told, in plot, cinematography, and score. Two films in which Nolan plays with time in a non-linear narrative are Memento and Dunkirk. The films were made 17 years apart and contain wildly different subject matter, but both take on the concept of time in a non-linear manner. Dunkirk recounts the miraculous evacuation of British and French troops from the town of the same name in France after they were cornered by German troops. The film is beautifully horrifying as it encapsulates the fear of waiting to find out whether you'll be saved or killed by an enclosing enemy. It is not the typical World War II film with awesome action set pieces and fighting like Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge. The film is in a constant state of tension and suspense that is meant to make you feel like the soldiers waiting to see if help will ever arrive. Memento is a thriller that follows a man with short-term memory loss as he looks for his wife's killer. What makes it unique is that the narrative is told backwards, as we see the protagonist find who he believes to be the killer, and we spend the rest of the film finding out how we got to that point. As Dr. Frank pointed out, the film puts us in the shoes of the protagonist in piecing together the memories of the events that happened. As it seems, both films engage the audience with the events on screen, making us feel like we are with the main character or characters. Dunkirk follows three separate storylines that take place within 1 week and eventually run parallel to each other. The Mole storyline, which covers the ground troops waiting for rescue during an onslaught of German bombing runs, takes place over the entirety of the week. The Sea storyline takes place during the final day of that week, which covers a group of civilians looking to use their boats to save the soldiers and take them across the English Channel. And the Air storyline takes place over the final hour of that week, which covers pilots offering air support for the troops' evacuation. Nolan, however, lets all of these storylines play out throughout the movie, so we meet the three groups of characters from the beginning and watch them all play out as they converge together in the end. Therefore, we end up seeing a character battered and bruised in one scene, only to see him fine in a later scene that technically takes place before the prior scene as the timeline switches. Similarly, in Memento, we see an event play out with no context. We then go back in time and watch the events that led up to the scene we just saw. We then keep looping back and back until we find out how everything played out to get us to the result that we just saw at the beginning. However, there is another timeline playing out in black and white sequences that happen chronologically to help provide some objectivity and explanation as to why the colored scenes are happening and eventually meet. So, in both films, we have these fractured narratives that require later scenes to provide context for what we already saw. Memento's use of this technique is more deliberate to account for the retrieval of memories, while Dunkirk plays out the storylines, but the technique is similar. It is also apparent that time is the enemy to the characters. Dunkirk reflects the passage of time through its camera work. YouTuber New Rockstars offered a great analysis of how the camera reflects the time and mood of the scenes. The scenes of the soldiers, taking place during a week, are captured by slow, panning shots, likely on a track to show a slow passage of time. The scenes on the boat use handheld camera work to reflect the sensation of being on the boat, but also moves quicker as time passes and danger narrows in. Finally, the shots in the air are frenetic, that reflect the adrenaline of dogfights and the anxiety of being limited to a certain amount of fuel in the air, thus limiting the amount of time that they can be up there. Also, Nolan never shows the German soldiers that are closing in on the Allies, except for the dive bombers, even as they shoot at them. Obviously, the Germans are the enemy, but it's time that is eating away at the soldiers, being the root of their fear of whether or not they will run out of time waiting for rescue. Time is a different beast in Memento. Time more directly impacts the protagonist alone, as he suffers from short-term memory loss, but the passage of time causes him to lose his memory, and therefore makes the task of investigating his wife's death difficult. He forgets key information, or becomes susceptible to manipulation by other characters, after time passes and his memory goes. Both films offer a unique perspective in telling a story that is engaging, smart, and different from standard movie narratives. When done correctly, the movie is a triumph of skill, technique, and craftsmanship, and through these movies, Christopher Nolan shows us that he's mastered his craft.